Hello and welcome to Off My Shelves, and in this episode we're going to be looking at Absolute Watchmen by Al Moore, Dave Gibbons, and colouring by John Higgins as well. And yeah, we will get underway. So for those who don't know, this year and this September marks 35 years since the release and the original comic monthly release of Watchmen. So it's 35 years, which is an amazing thing really, because it's still one of the most talked about graphic novels and books out really. You very rarely go a year without seeing someone somewhere on some website, some YouTube channel talking about this book and how great it is really. And certainly for me it's one of the most formative books that I've read really. But before I get too far into all that, the build of the book, it is absolute size, so obviously it's bigger than a library edition, bigger than an Omnibus by Marvel and by DC. It comes in a slipcase. It is a very basic graphic designs on the slipcase with just this doomsday clock motif on the front and back, and then Absolute Watchmen on the side with the authors. The book itself comes with a dust jacket, and it's got that classic partially kind of obstructive smiley face with a dot of red coming down here. Watchmen in yellow, really high contrast in blacks and yellows. Absolute Watchmen on the side, and then Absolute in red on the back. When you take the dust jacket off, it just mirrors what is on the actual slipcase itself. So what's on the slipcase, apart from the DC logo, is the same as what's on the actual boards, and it's got this kind of faux leather finish as well. The binding, as you would expect, is perfect. It is matte finished paper, not glossy paper, which for me is preferred because I've always read Watchmen in matte finished paper, and if it was suddenly high glossy paper, as weird as it sounds, I don't know how I'd enjoy it, to be honest. The one thing I will say about the build is this is very much a recent reprint of the Absolute edition. I'm not too sure exactly when it came out because it's kind of always been in print and they're always updating it, but it is lacking the ribbon bookmark that earlier prints came with. So some earlier prints will have a red ribbon bookmark, but for some reason most of the Absolute Watchmen's around now don't, which is weird because normally all the Absolutes come with that ribbon bookmark, and I think it's more of a mistake in this print run more than on purpose, but I don't know for definite. But either way, if you like ribbon bookmarks, track down the earlier prints for a red ribbon bookmark. Now, the story of Watchmen, and how do you encapsulate the story with such depth and complexity as Watchmen in such a short video, really? For those who've never read Watchmen, really, it starts off with a murder, and a murder of a masked superhero, really. In this fictionalized world set in 1985, there are costumed heroes going around New York and fighting crime, and one of them, the comedian, is murdered. And other costume criminals, namely in the opening pages Rorschach, he starts beginning to investigate this murder of the comedian. But then as you go through the story there, it starts bringing in loads and loads of different elements and really world building. The whole book starts off with an intriguing premise of this mysterious murder, these mysterious superhero characters in this alternative history of New York and the world in general. But then as you go through, it becomes less about that intrigue and mystery and more about the world that they set in, how that world works, how the superheroes fit in with it. And so yeah, and the world building is crazy. I mean, for 12 issues, the amount of world building they get, because that's what it is, 12 issues that were originally printed back in the 1980s, 1986. But yeah, so those 12 issues take you through various parts of this world, all the while delving deeper into this mysterious killing of the comedian, but then widening that mystery out. There's all manner of different costume superheroes really that creep into this story. But not only that, it goes back in time and tells the story of earlier costume superheroes during the 40s and 50s and how their formation into a group, kind of like the Justice League or that type of thing, actually influenced this modern 80s version of the superhero. But all of these superheroes, Night Owl, Rorschach, Ozymandias, Silk Spectre, they've all got their own backstory, really deeply layered and fleshed out backstory. So when you're going through the book, you find out about their backstory, where they are now, where they've come from, and how they are going to try and solve this mystery that's surrounding this murder. and where the murder then links them into this gigantically ambitious conspiracy, really, and all these different strands eventually come together because there is a large scale conspiracy going on, and the more they dig into this comedian's murder, the more they realise that the comedian's murder was just one part of a gigantically complex plot that is almost over before they even began investigating it. Sublimely done, it really is. It's the artwork in it by Dave Gibbons is insane, and he done the lettering. It is absolutely astounding what Dave Gibbons does in this book, really, and all props as well to the colourist John Higgins, because the colouring of this really adds something to it as well, because the stuff John Higgins does with colour in this book is amazing. I mean, on certain pages, you know, he uses primary colours to really alter and change the mood, and it's fantastic. The art in it is amazing, the colouring is amazing, the panel layout, the writing and the pacing of the story is absolutely perfect, for me at least, really. Every issue, it peels a bit more back of this mystery, but then fleshes out the world that these characters are living in so deeply and richly. So if you've never read Watchmen and you start reading it and getting into it and start uncovering that first issue when the comedian is murdered, and then go to the next when it goes into another avenue of this world, and then slowly but surely you will get to a point where all of these strands come together and hopefully, at least for me anyway, give a massively interesting and complex payout. And it also kind of looks into how a superhero actually solves the problem and not just constantly puts plasters on the problem. For me as well, this was the first graphic novel that I ever was given to read, amazingly. I mentioned this to Adam from Comic Bunk, and he said that's quite a complex one to read first, and he's probably right, but because this was my formative one, I really didn't question it, really. I thought all comic books were this dense and this complex, because previous to this I'd only read, you know, the Beano and the Dandy and a few Viz comics and some Garfield, but I never really got into comics. But then when I turned 18 or 19, my brother gave me a trade paperback version of this. I read it and absolutely adored it, and my second one after this was The Dark Knight Returns. Loved that as well, and it was those two books that really formed everything. I wouldn't be having a YouTube channel and I wouldn't be talking about comics on any level without this book, to be honest. This book really was my big entrance into comics, and it made me realise how powerful a form graphic novels are and comics are, because you can tell stories in a totally and utterly unique way. And certainly this story has been adapted to film, it's been adapted in different ways, but ultimately it's custom made for a comic book. The way it's laid out, the scenes, the story, it's got comic books within comic books, and it's got extra information at the end of each chapter which takes you deeper into that world building, and it really did just blow me away when I read it the first time, and so much so that I've read it about 4 times now, and I still would read it again, really. Honestly, I have no issue revisiting this time and time again. And the reason I haven't gone too much into plot details really is because it is insanely dense with plot. I mean, it's easy for me to say the setup, that there's a murder, that there's this world with costumed heroes and they're getting dragged into this large conspiracy, but to go into more depth than that is really a fool's errand. You've got to read it and get deep into this world to fully understand it. It's not a happy-go-lucky world, there's not much humour in the book, but the depth of the story, the complexity of the writing and the complexity of the characters are just great, I think, and they really do just keep you hooked. And when the mystery element kind of gets revealed, even though some people may be disappointed with the payoff at the end, or they may like it or they may question it, one thing it will do is it'll get you talking about it. It'll get you looking online to see what other people think. The ending is almost like it raises the question of what it is to be a superhero and to be a hero in the modern age, and that's why I love it so much. But certainly if you've never read Watchmen, get on it, give it a read. It will take you longer to read than most comic books because it is long, it's very wordy, but it is absolutely worth every word, every panel on every level, I think. I know a lot of people are split when it comes to Watchmen because it's got so much hype around it over the years, but for me, it lives up to that hype every time, so I don't mind giving out more hype really. And yeah, definitely well worth a read, I think. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed, and I will catch you on the next one.